Okay, so we will start. I'm sure we'll have some others trickling in, but we'll just get started. So thank you everyone for coming, all the attendees. This is gonna be really fun and you're gonna learn a lot, so this is really exciting. If you don't know me, I'm a teacher candidate at Western University and I'm also the program coordinator for Online Teacher. And yeah, so this is the speaker series. This is episode 3, we'll say. And Jessica is here going to give you a tour of her virtual classroom in D2L. She is a teacher at the London Catholic District School Board. Is it Google Classroom? I'm probably wrong.
No, it's D2L.
Okay, I'm right. I was like, I'm totally getting that wrong. And she's going to give you some full out tour of her like top things that she likes in her classroom, and then also some of her best engagement practices that she uses. So during the session, feel free to use the Q&A button to ask questions. If there's a question that's relevant during what we're talking about during the discussion, then I'll ask her right away. But if it's not, don't worry, I'm not ignoring you. I'm just going to save it for either when it is relevant or at the end when we have time to answer all of the questions. You can also send them to the chat. If you do send your questions to the chat, just make sure that you select, you'll see it says 2. Make sure it says all panelists and attendees. The only reason that I want to make sure that all the attendees can hear or see the question is just because sometimes we'll get 5 of the same question. So if you see that someone else is asking it, it just makes it easier for me to not have to go through as many. So yeah, those are the 2 options. Everything else, if you have any questions about anything technology wise, like if, I don't know, something's cutting out, just send us a message to all panelists during the session and then we'll address that. But all of your videos are off and your microphones are muted. I know that's usually a question at the beginning, so don't worry. You're not like hidden somewhere. We can't see you. You can just see us. So without further ado, welcome, Jessica.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Anna, and thank you, everyone, for joining today. Hopefully you get a little something out of it, and then we can take up any questions as needed and kind of go through that. So I'm just going to share my screen with you. Okay, so as Anna mentioned, today we're going to be talking, I'm going to do a little bit of a tour of my virtual classroom. As she mentioned, I do use D2L or Brightspace or VLE. They kind of have a few names. So if you're familiar with that, that's just kind of the program that my board uses. And then I'm going to kind of go through and talk about some of the best practices. And then throughout, I actually have pictures of like screenshots of my classroom just for student names and things like that, so that I was able to cover them just for confidentiality. So I hope that that's okay. So to introduce myself, I am Jessica Ward, as you know. I am a grade 4 virtual teacher this year. So I actually graduated from the Western teaching program in 2018. And then after that, I worked for 2 years at a school called Holy Family in London. So I taught a grade 6 class, full year in person. And then I did a 5-6 class where I was, as we know, we kind of went into emergency mode. So half the year was in person. And then in March, I moved to virtual as kind of like emergent virtual teaching. And this year I've had the opportunity as a grade 4 teacher now I'm at a different school, I'm at Sir Arthur Curdy, to be teaching online and addressing students in that way. So I've kind of had both experiences. So I'll be able to speak from 2 different perspectives, and I'll kind of be referencing both of those throughout as we go. Okay, so how do we promote engagement in a virtual class? So when we talk about engagement, I know especially a lot in Teachers College, we hear a lot about like all these resources and all these exciting activities, and those are so amazing and so awesome. I'm gonna kind of be approaching this presentation from a little bit of a different perspective, just in the sense that absolutely those activities and resources are amazing and wonderful to have, and there's so many available to us. But one thing that's really important is that we need to remember that we need to create a safe space. So even though we are kind of in a different venue in that way that we're doing it online, it's the same. So we want to go back to basics. We want to set up our online classroom in the same way that you would like a brick and mortar classroom. So that regular in-person learning, it kind of looks the same. And I think sometimes when we transfer to online, we forget about those really important aspects that we naturally just do that need to still be applied to help build that engagement with your students. So one of the biggest things for me is organization. I love organization. So when I talk about that, and I have some pictures and examples throughout. So as I go through, I'll talk about a few things and then I'll show you some examples. So having that weekly or daily schedule is really important, and having that for the students laid out for them so they can see everything that they need to be going through and doing throughout the day, and they know what to expect. And that really will help with them engaging with the work if they know what it is and where to find it. When we're talking about content, so everything that you're uploading, those really fun activities, all those cool resources that you're providing with the students, you need to make sure that they can actually access them. So if you're having a lot of difficulties technology-wise with students engaging in a specific activity, the activity then loses its value because they cannot get there, they can't find it. And if they're not able to find it, they obviously can't do it, right? And if it's too hard for them to find, it's not within their reach, then it might just not work for them. So we want to make sure that they're able to actually get there so they can enjoy those awesome activities that we do plan for our students. Instructions are so important. So having those clear instructions with different colors, fonts, and organized ideas. If you're having bullet points, you're having pictures, like different things like that are really going to help with your students. Last year when I was teaching, and this year, I have other teachers as like students in my class, virtual classroom. So they're able to look over my instructions as someone who doesn't know what I'm talking about. And then sometimes they'll message me and say, actually, that makes no sense. I don't even know what you're talking about. And then, so then you have to go back and think, you have to make sure that someone who you're not there in person to give clarification. So you want to make sure that they're clear, concise, and you don't want a ton of information on the page for them. Visuals are super important. I've included some in this presentation as well, just so you can kind of see what I'm talking about. But silly things like putting your little Bitmoji there with a key, students really grasp onto those things and they're more likely to engage with the work if they have these little pictures. Or for those students that we can differentiate with, having those pictures might help if they struggle with reading. So that's something I'm finding this year with my grade 4s. They're a little bit younger, so those pictures are like an extra help. Pre-scheduling posts. So in D2L, you can actually pre-schedule announcements, which is where I put my schedule every day. And I set it every day for 5 a.m. I don't think anyone's up, but just in case someone's up before me, then they're able to look and then it's all ready to go. So I always have that scheduled the day before, ready to post, so I don't have to worry about anything like that. I also hide old posts. So you can actually make it not visible for the students anymore. I go through the whole week and then I create a new post with items that we did last week in case anyone wants to go look back and they can see it. But that way the main page isn't overflowing, because if there's too much information, the students might get lost in it and not be able to kind of find where they're supposed to go. So some examples. So this is the main page of my D2L, Brightspace, whatever you want to call it, classroom. So at the top banner, I have a picture of me and a big welcome. So that's what they see every single day when they're coming on into our classroom. Same way that you would kind of greet a student at the door. So thinking about things like that. This announcement feed is where I do most of my posting and where I keep a lot of my information. Under communication, there's a discussions section, which I'll show you as well, which I use a lot. This year, I'm starting to use assignments more, just as a way for students to submit work that they've done on other things. They'll just put in a link there and submit that work, and then that will link me to their work just because it's easier to keep track of. And then resources, I use content very, very frequently. So this is just kind of a basic layout of what this looks like. This is my classroom from this year, just to clarify. So then within my content section, I have this year have broken it down into subjects. Last year I did it differently, but this year I chose to do by subjects. And then if you look, so for example, I have religion here, and then I have each of the 5 units that I'm doing, which there's a little eye with a line through it, which means the students cannot see it. So I will only make that visible to students as we go through each unit. So at no point will they be able to see all 5 units, because then I just find that they forget where they're supposed to be going and don't remember what unit we're on. And it just helps keep things a little less cluttered and not overflowing with information. So right now, all they can see are the class prayers. And as you click on each item throughout, they'll be able to kind of see where that's going to go and what work is underneath it. And again, each assignment at a time I make visible so that it's not everything is there for them. So this is how I set it up last year, and there's no right or wrong way to do it. I was speaking with a colleague today who this year still sets her classroom up with weeks, and that's great, and that works because she has little guys. So it's a little bit harder for them to kind of navigate. This is how I did it last year. I had each week, and then I had the assignments under each day. So my students last year were a little bit more comfortable with technology in the sense that I had already taught them a lot of the things that we needed to know before switching to online, just because we were already doing it in the classroom. So it was a little bit easier for them to find that information. So they were able to independently go to each week and look at the assignment for the day and kind of work through that, knowing like what tasks were for the day. Okay, so this is how I did my daily or my schedule last year. So I had as you can see, the chart with Monday to Friday, and I made sure it was color coordinated so that the students could see very clearly each day. These colors stayed the same for every single week. So if there was a holiday on the Monday, there just would be nothing in the pink section, but I always kept it the same colors every day. With that as well, I tried to keep consistently the same kind of activities. So for a Monday, every Monday we had language because this is when it wasn't full days. So we did an article and then a discussion post, and it changed articles obviously all the time, but keeping it that way. And then Wednesday was some sort of video and then an activity and like different subjects. And then we had a novel study as well. So I found that keeping that consistency helped students stay engaged because they knew what to expect. And there was different topics each time and exciting opportunities to interact with their friends without changing things up too much. And then this was the first time we were starting our novel study. So I wanted to include a video with me talking so that they could connect with me in that way to be able to see how excited I was about the novel. And I read them like the back of the novel just so that they could be excited with me and see kind of what we were going to do together with that. Okay, and then this is what my schedule looks like this year. So the picture on the right is what I started with on my first day. So, first full day of school. So I had just a screenshot of what the timetable looks like, as you can see here, the pink square. And then below I had a link to a Google Doc presentation, and I'll show you that after. It's on the next slide, of all the different slides. So it broke down each period. The first day I found that the students they weren't comfortable enough with D2L or the technology to be able to navigate where they needed to find everything. So I still gave them specific instructions, but it wasn't working for us. So then the next day I switched it to the picture you see on the left. So I have a little Bitmoji picture, and then I broke down and I have spaces and colors for all the times. And then all the writing that's in blue, those are actually clickable links within D2L. So I've linked all the content so that they're able to just click on it and it'll take them exactly to where they need to be. So there's not this fumbling around of trying to find everything. They just click and go. I prefer personally the Google Docs, or the Google slide as I sent it out. They're just not ready for that yet. So down the road, I might move into something like that. One thing that's a little bit frustrating about D2L is you can insert a table into announcements, but the table doesn't stay when you post, so you don't see the lines. So it makes it really confusing for students to learn. I don't love the way my schedule is right now. I just can't find currently a better way to do it. I've tried to, the whole posting everything in and pasting everything, and it's just not working. So this is what I'm using because it's working for my students. And then I will continue to just kind of accept it right now. And then as we get more comfortable, I'll kind of be able to change that. So I'm going to show you what this Google slide was that I shared with them on the first day. So we had the breakdown of all the times and the subjects when their breaks were a different color. So that was very clear for them to see. And then the team's check-ins as well. And I can talk a little bit about that in a bit. So for math, we talked about exactly what we need to do. I chose to do that on Teams that day, just because it was easier for me. But I usually do, for math, I do a little bit of Teams and give a lesson and kind of demonstrate what the lesson or the activity looks like. And then I give them time on their own to go complete that activity. And then they submit that before their break. For language, it's typically just an activity. So there's something they can review, or a video from me, or a video from the internet. A lot of discussion posts I use. And this is time where I am available, but I'm not actively on video call with them. I do end up video calling most of my students during that time, just kind of one-on-one check-ins as needed, but I'm not actually on it teaching the whole time. After lunch, we went on Teams and we presented, I had a Google slide and each kid posted something about them to introduce themselves. So we went around and then they watched a video and were able to fill out a Google form. So as we go through, there's more activities, and then I just talk about the Teams check-ins with them, and that's when we do our video calls. So I do video calls at 9 a.m., 1 p.m. Those are both for attendance, so I have to do it during those times. And then I do a 2 p.m. check-in as well, because that's the end of my asynchronous learning. So then I'm able to check in with them. This is an example of some discussion posts. So this is a really good way to get students engaging with one another. So they can comment on each other's posts. A lot of times I will have a video or some other piece of material that goes along with the discussion post that they can kind of comment on. I will always give instructions in the posts, and I try to also remind them of things like periods, capitals, just little reminders, so that I'm not just getting one-word answers in the discussion post. It's telling them exactly what I need from them. And then if I would like them to respond to someone, I tell them that as well. Otherwise, they won't necessarily do that. And same with this, I hide all old discussion posts just so that it's not overwhelming for them. The next big thing is routine. So with routine, consistency is key. And so when I was talking about that schedule last week of having different things, or for example, we have math every morning, that just helps the students to have expectations, know where they need to be, what they need to be doing. And that goes with maintaining a schedule as much as you can. Obviously, some things come up, like tomorrow for Orange Shirt Day, we'll be spending more time on Teams than we typically would, just so we can have those conversations. But they know that that's a special day. So it's diverting from our normal routine. This one's really important. So building student confidence in technology and this new virtual classroom before exploring new tech opportunities. So we have tons of awesome things that we want to use. We have Padlets, we have all these different places that we can go to engage the students. But if you start throwing all these different things at them, they're going to be overwhelmed and they're not going to be able to engage with those items because it's just a little bit too much. So starting with a Google form this week, and then next week moving into submitting assignments through assignments, or then using a Google slide, and taking those small steps. So then now in a couple weeks or next week, depending on how the students feel, I'm going to be able to now give them a Padlet, or we can do a Kahoot, or different things like that. Whereas parents might feel overwhelmed if we're doing so many different things with different pieces of technology that it's just, we don't want to overwhelm them. It's already an overwhelming situation. Making everything accessible. So there are sections on D2L where you're able to make groups, and then you can actually post so only certain people see it. So you don't have, you have a student in your class who's on an IEP. You don't have them seeing everyone else's work and seeing what they're missing, whereas they can just see everything for them. And they're going the exact same place as everyone, making sure that everyone can get it, making sure everyone has the technology for it. So you're not giving them a piece of software that they have to download that maybe not everyone can use, making sure that everyone can get to those things and that it works for everyone. Otherwise, it's not a good option for what you're doing. I also this year have included a how-to series, and I have a picture of it on my slides, just so that I find I get the same questions over and over again. So, I'm trying to log into this account and it's not working, or I don't know where to find Mathletics. So I have pre-recorded my screen with videos step-by-step of how to get there. So when parents email me or call me to have questions, they know that they can just go to the spot, watch the video, and it should walk them through it. And then if they still have more questions, that's when they can come to me. So it's kind of, obviously I communicate with the parents a lot, but just giving myself and them an opportunity for them to figure things out independently. And then we can work together if there's still issues. And maintaining those daily posts, even if there's no news, you can post and say, nothing new today, hope you have a great day, anything, just so they always hear from you. They're expecting that post. So it's really important that they see that. So we talked about the schedule already, just kind of keeping that consistency with it. And this was my weekly one. So this is my how-to series. It only has, it has a few more things now since I took this picture. But so how to send an email. Email is the way I communicate with my students. So I wanna make sure they know how to get to it and they know how to properly send an email. Some of these are videos and some of them are PDFs that they can kind of sort through. But this has been really, really helpful. So I would recommend this to anyone that wanted it. A next big piece is connection. So when I got switched to, I didn't choose online learning this year, just so everyone knows. It was something that just kind of how it goes. I'm a New York teacher, so I got placed in online teaching. And I was really worried about starting a new school year with students I don't know. It was easier last year when I already had these connections with students and parents, whereas this year I'm walking into a virtual classroom where none of these parents know who I am. I don't know anything about them. I don't know anything about my students. I don't have access to their OSRs. So I'm not able to see previous things and gain some knowledge on them. So I was really worried about if it was just going to be this super disconnected aspect, but it's actually been really great. And I have been able to really get to know a lot of my students, and it's so wonderful. So you want to really take the time to learn about your students. So at the beginning of the year, I video called with every single kid just to introduce myself. And then I asked them kind of silly questions, like what's your favorite thing to do at home? And one student brought on his hamster and showed me his new hamster. So just building these connections that I'm able to see with them and things that they like, things you would do in a normal classroom, but now you need to make sure that there's space to get to know them. And then once you know those interests, you can incorporate them. So if you know that a student likes Star Wars, throw that into a math lesson where you're saying lightsabers or whatever, just so that they're going to be more excited. They're going to be like, oh, Miss Ward knows that I love like Star Wars, and now there's lightsabers in our math work, things like that. Allowing them to get to know you, which is something I think sometimes we forget about, just because students don't naturally get to know us throughout the school day when we're in person, that they don't necessarily always get virtually. So finding those moments where you can bring yourself into the classroom. So attaching voice clips to instructions instead of you reading them out makes a really big difference. Having video calls. So whether that means pre-recorded videos or live video calls, depending on your comfort level, those moments are really cool for the kids. And so having sometimes social calls as well. So it's not always curriculum based. It's kind of check-ins of how was your day? What are you finding difficult? When I do attendance, for example, I don't call each kid's name and they say here. I give them a prompting question of what's your favorite healthy snack? And then instead of saying here, we go through and they tell me what their favorite healthy snack is. And that's how I do my attendance. And then I change it up every day for them. Adding Bitmojis, or I learned how to use GIFs. So for me, one of the biggest resources that I use for little teaching things is Facebook and TikTok, which I know sounds absurd, but I'm in a million Facebook groups with different Ontario teachers and some teachers internationally as well that I can connect with and work together with, as well as TikTok. I've learned a lot of tips and tricks, especially over the summer, about online learning. There's a lot of teachers in the States who are on virtually, and they have a lot of experience because they have been teaching for a few more weeks than us. So it's a really great place to kind of learn that. And little things that you feel comfortable sharing with your students. So for example, today, on our final video call of the day, I said to my students, oh, like I have told them about this presentation I have. And I said, I'm really stressed. Like, what do you guys think about that? Like, is that okay for me to be stressed? And then we kind of talked about the difference between good stress and bad stress. And then it gives us that opportunity to have those conversations. They are going to be doing presentations on Thursday, and I've briefly told them about it. And then, so for me, we talked, I said, what do you guys think I should do in my presentation? Like, what are some really important things? So then I had someone saying it's okay to make mistakes and make sure your voice is clear and loud so that everyone can hear you, and make sure everyone else's mics are muted. So it was really cute to kind of get that feedback. So now when we go on Thursday to talk about their presentations, I'm going to say, oh, remember when I was really nervous and you guys helped me? Like, here, I want to help you. Let's talk about those strategies again. So having that connection, that's huge for the kids, because now, and they get to go home, or well, they stay home obviously, but they get to go to their parents and say, oh, Miss Ward has this presentation tonight, and so told us that they're doing this tonight. Having things to share about their class is really important, especially if they're talking to students that are in-person learning, to get that experience as well. Giving students a chance to connect with one another. So I have in our Teams chat, this is just personally what I like to do. I allow the students to kind of type at their leisure and chat with each other while I'm talking or during waiting time. So if my announcements are on and I'm on mute, we're just kind of waiting. The students can type to each other and chat with each other and check in, and that's okay. And they know that as long as it's appropriate and I can see it, I'm involved in the chats, that it's okay. So today we had students who were writing on it when they were supposed to be doing math work. So then I just kind of wrote in saying, is everyone working on their math, with like a little thinking emoji, and then everyone kind of dispersed. But just having those moments where they can chat with each other, talking to the students now, they're really excited about those moments and it's really good for them. And students are going to be more likely to engage if they want to make you proud. So if they don't really know you, they're not going to be worried about not handing in work. They're like, it's not for younger kids at least. So having those connections and building those relationships and with families and parents is huge in making sure that there is some accountability with them. So here are some examples. This is the GIF I made. The longer you stare at it, the creepier it gets. But this was a part of a presentation that I sent to families just to kind of introduce myself. So I had my Bitmojis in, but then this way they could actually see what I looked like. And if they wanted to share this with people, they could share this with family members or whatever that looks like to share that kind of excitement for the school year.
A couple questions, Jessica. Yeah, I'm just going to interrupt. No, it's okay. Do you call them before the school year? Or do you email or call the parents and say you'd like to speak to them?
Okay, so great question. We were given permission from our principals to call the students ahead of time. So before the school day time started. So I first called parents, introduced myself, told them a little bit about me, and told them that I would be setting up, I had to ask them tech questions like, do they know the student login? Do they have technology? Gathering that information. And then once I had that, I was able to send out an email, which is what you can see right now. So I sent out an email to students and I told the parents it had to be through the students' emails. They could get onto a Teams call. And I scheduled a time and a date and a Teams call for each student with their parents so I could meet both of them. So I made sure that it was appropriate time for the parents to be involved if they chose to be. I originally just sent them a link. So we kind of have to do this gradual release. So I sent them just a link for them to come to this Zoom call. I sent like the how to use, tips and tricks, and then I sent the Microsoft support page as well for the teams. And then if they had any questions, they could email me. And then before each call, I kind of called each family to check in with them and make sure that, see if they needed any help getting on. Now my students, I just send them a calendar invite. They have the app, they go to their calendar, they join themselves, and I don't do any inviting that way. But this is what I had to do in the beginning so that parents were able to access it and not be overwhelmed and make sure that I could meet them in that way.
Awesome, thanks.
Okay, let's see what's next. Okay, so now as I talked about for my daily meetings, I have students who just come, they know what time we go at, they log in. I don't give any reminders except for in our schedule, and they just join. What I did, I know diagnostic is a big thing too as well, and like how are we assessing, things like that. So I don't know anything about these kids. I haven't seen their report card. So I'm just gathering all this information. So it was really important for me to read individually with each student. So now that they are comfortable with Teams, I made sure we had a week or two, or a week and a half, to make sure that they were comfortable with using the program. And then I just fully posted a schedule. So I blocked out all the kids' names, but I just posted this under content, linked it in my schedule, daily schedule in that post, and said, check your reading schedule. And I made just one call for each block. And I told students, you're going to be waiting in the lobby because I might be reading with another student. So then I encouraged them to bring their own books so I could see what books they had at home to read from. And then I also shared my screen with them and had kind of leveled books and assessment so I could kind of see where they were at, asking comprehension questions and kind of documenting that. I was a little bit nervous about how this was going to go with kids just having to show up, and I didn't have to give a single reminder to any of the kids. All of them showed up, most of them early and ready to go, and it was really great, and I learned a lot. So even like the comprehension questions, all of that, like I learned so much about them. And then if there were students who were struggling, then I was able to have kind of social moments with them to kind of build connections and them not be as worried about if their reading wasn't as great as maybe they wanted it to be. So that kind of gradual release from going to here's the link, here's how you log in, to just posting a schedule for the whole class, that was within 2-week time. So the students are learning and they're able to grasp these things if you give them the opportunities to. So with that kind of goes expectations. So making sure you have clear expectations for the classroom, for handing in work, and for video calls. So that's an extra added piece, but the same way that you would in a regular school, you can co-create these with students. So I gave some suggestions, and I have like a little like Bitmoji page that we go through every day of the video call expectations. So mute your mic, all those things. We go through it right now every day, but eventually we won't need to, because they'll know. They raise their hands like it's honestly like a normal class. They also know how to communicate with me, and this piece is really huge. So they know that there's only one way for them to get a hold of me, and that is through email. That's just my personal preference. On D2L, there is a chat option and an email option within D2L. If they send you emails through D2L, it comes from a different email than their school email. So I personally don't like it that way, because unless they say their name, it doesn't say who it's from. And then sometimes I miss those communications, or they don't know where to check them. So it is an extra step for them to actually check like their Outlook email. But I find, and then I have records of it as well. So I have a bunch of folders in my email, and then I can keep everything. So then if there's ever something that comes up and I'm like, oh, I forget what happened here, I know exactly where to look for it in my student communication section or my parent communication section. And then I'm able to look through that. You can also chat with people on Teams. Like there's so many different places. So if they know the only appropriate place to message you, that's where they will. Due dates. So students need to know when they need to finish things by. If you have an ongoing project, then they need to know when that needs to finish by. Same as in school, is the expectation that this is finished at the end of the period, at the end of the day. Like what does that look like? So making sure that they know. Positive reinforcement is huge, as we know, in a normal classroom, but as well as online. So if you have a student who's consistently showing up early for video calls, let that one student in early and say, thank you so much for always being on time. And like really taking, it just takes 2 seconds, then you let everyone else in, but that moment is huge for them. If you have a student that is constantly handing in work, completed and to the best of their ability, send them an email, say, you know what, thank you so much, CC their parents. And then they have this opportunity to share, oh, you know, my teacher like called me out today and it was really great. And having those moments so that when you still need to have those reminders to catch up on things, you already have a positive rapport with those students. Making your office hours, personal office hours, you have to make these work for you. So my personal hours, I do just the school day, which is 9 to 3:30. And I'm comfortable with parents emailing me at any hour. And I just tell them I'm not going to answer. So they know, I say to them, you can email me whenever you would like, but I will not respond unless it's Monday to Friday, 9 to 3:30. And same with the students. So that's what I'm comfortable with. I just turn off notifications for the mail app. I have my email separate, just so then it's not bugging me when I'm at home, because I'm obviously on my phone. So making sure that you have those separate times and that parents know that. And there are going to be times, so sticking to those expectations can sometimes be really hard. So last year, I remember I had a student who would rarely come on. And the one night he emailed me, I think at like Friday at 11 p.m. or something, because he's doing his work then. And so obviously I want to respond right away and be like, let me help you. This is when you can do it. He's never on, right? So I want to take that moment to connect with him. But if I do, that sets a precedent that next weekend, he can also email me at that time. So if keeping those expectations clear, even when it's really, really hard to, or a parent's emailing you freaking out about something, unless it's like an emergency, obviously, but every single time you break what you want and what you expect, then it's going to happen again next time. And no fault to the parent. That's our job to make sure that we have those expectations and we keep them clear for the parents and for the students. So kind of with that goes accountability. So this is for you and your students. So we obviously throughout the school day, we have synchronous and asynchronous times. During those synchronous times doesn't always mean that we're on camera and we're on live chats, but it does mean that we're available. So I make it very clear to my students that I'm going to respond as soon as I can. So I remind them that I might be in a meeting with another student. I might be in a meeting with my principal. I might be on yard duty. So these are different things and factors that kind of come into play. But those moments when you can immediately respond, do, so that they know that you are there. And if you're taking a while to respond, they're not going to be like, oh, she's just not answering. They're going to be like, oh, she must be in a meeting, because she always answers right away, and doing your best during those designated times to make sure you can respond to them. Giving constant feedback. So even if it's a great job, Billy, you did you did really good at this, telling them that and giving them that, even if it's an assignment that you're not marking per se, like taking for your mark book, still give them the feedback. So, if they're taking the time to do it, you need to take the time to tell them that you received it at least. So giving them those moments, and follow up with students if they are not completing their work or responsibilities, and if they are. So I will show you some weekly progress updates that I send to parents and to students. Last year, I only sent them to students, and this year I did both, just because I know it's a bit of a different time. So I want to have those moments where I'm connecting with the parents as well. And when we're talking about that feedback, name dropping to students, I know it sounds silly, but saying great job and their name makes a huge difference. So they know that that's for them. Or mentioning, oh, I love that you put this in, and something very specific about their work, because it's so easy that we could just mass say good job and messages that way. So helping the students know that that message is for them is really important. So this is an example of what I use this is made on Google Sheets. This is what I use to just track students handing in work. This is the way that I choose to do it. If you're with a different board, there is a way, I watched a TikTok on it, but there is a way that you can turn a Google sheet and form into using Autocrat to make it into like an email that sends out to parents, and it's really pretty. My board unfortunately has blocked Autocrat, so it's not something I can use, but this is how I do it. So I just put in the check marks, and then I click each student, and then I color coordinate on the side at the end of the week what they finished. So then I can kind of see which students are consistently green, which students need a little bit of push to kind of get everything in that week, and those students who are falling behind. And it's very clear with the colors to see. And then I also have tallies at the bottom for assignments. So this is more for me. So if I look at an assignment and only 4 kids did it, that tells me that I did something wrong, because I normally have a lot of students who are submitting their work. So that says to me that this activity wasn't accessible. So I need to look at that and see how I can improve it to make sure that everyone's able to connect with that work. And especially because you're going to see those 10 or 12 or whatever students consistently handing in work. So this is kind of what I use for that. And then obviously then I mark certain items as well, and that goes into like a separate mark book. So this is what I've been sending out to parents this year. So I just have this kind of generated email. So it says, hi there, below is an update of the week of the work. And then I put in a little sentence that's very specific to their child. So I put in, so this student was active in video calls, being prepared and early. So he actually started a video. I didn't know how to do it yet. He started a video call for the whole class, and I wasn't there because he was so early. And so he's admitting people, and then he's trying to call me. So he keeps buzzing me to come in because he knows that a teacher is supposed to be there. So it was a really cute moment that I wanted to specifically mention so the parent and student know that I was talking to them. And this goes to both of them. So I have this chart that goes out, and then I just copy and paste the check mark if they've done it. And then if they haven't, I leave it blank and give a little bit of a reminder. This is a little bit time consuming just because of the way I do have to send it out. It takes me about an hour to do, but I find that it's worth it. So it helps with, if I didn't do this, students would just think it was fine to not do work. And so I'm including the parents in those conversations. And then if I'm consistently sending emails, I have also records of saying that, these are the things that weren't completed consistently week after week. Like what's our plan? Like, how can I support you to make this more successful? And looking at that and saying that, you've had all these conversations and kept both the students and the parents updated constantly. It's so important to me. So this is kind of something that I am willing to spend that extra time on. And yeah, so that's all I have. If anyone has any questions.
We have a question. So everyone feel free to send all your questions, any questions you have for Jessica, and just send that to the Q&A, and then I'll fire them all at her basically. So the first one, Aaron asks, spending every day in front of a screen for the entire day is challenging. Do you have any strategies that help with this day-to-day challenge for students spending so much time in front of the screen?
Great question. So I have break times put in, which I really encourage the students to use and kind of go outside, take those breaks. Every single day, I also have a health/phys ed activity. So each week I have a different, so this week we're doing square breathing. So that's part of their like mental health. So they have a video that they watch and they focus on doing kind of square breathing throughout the whole week, and then they get comfortable with it. And then next week we'll have something different. With that, I also have a physical activity that they're encouraged to do. So sometimes it is videos, which we try to get away from sometimes. So then it's saying, okay, go do this. And they're able to kind of grab physical items from home and kind of do activities as well that way, especially like artwork. We have them actually drawing and then just submitting pictures, things like that, to get those kind of breaks from the computers. And then I also have a monthly kind of like fitness challenge almost, where there's one thing per day that they can complete. So one of them sometimes is go for a walk with a family member. And then we talk about rules for our calendar, making sure that, you know, we get parent permission before doing any of these things, and they can kind of see how many items that they can complete. And so that way, if they are away from the screen, they still feel like they are like doing their work, right? So it's giving them those activities outside the computer.
Awesome. Another one is, are there any educational apps or games that you use within your online lessons?
So a lot of the ones, so there's tons. Like you can use Kahoots, you can use Padlets, there's Poll Everywhere, all of these, a lot of resources. I use Mathletics a lot. There's a new one that I'm checking out called Smash Education. I haven't quite looked into it yet, but it looks pretty interesting. So I'm going to be checking that out as well. But just making sure that everyone knows how to use those things and get on them. So doing kind of like one step at a time. But mostly for my lessons, I will do like a lot of videos I like, and then a lot of discussions. And then I have Google Slides where they can kind of interact with each other. I would say that's mostly where I work out of, but then throwing in those Poll Everywheres, those Kahoots, like things like that.
Awesome. This one's kind of an opinion question. Is this something you think will be an everyday reality for students of the future?
That's a good question. I think it could be for some students. And we do see kind of internationally, like a lot of students who do one-on-one tutoring a lot through virtual learning and through people in different places. I don't think it's out of the question, depending on obviously what happens with health things. But I think it's really good for students to be able to do these things and kind of seeing where that goes with it.
Awesome. Okay, last chance to ask a question. I'll ask you a question, Jessica. What do you think has been the biggest learning curve for you in the transition to online?
That's a good question. I find like technology comes very easily to me. So working with colleagues and friends who are also kind of in the same places is really, really helpful. So having those other teachers as students in your classroom, I'm constantly video calling. Like I'm kind of team teaching with a girl who I've never even met. We video call and she'll post like math stuff in my class and then I'll do a different subject in her class. So we kind of split up the prep work that way. So it's not necessarily that I've found challenges myself with technology. For me, honestly, the biggest transition is trying to be kind of patient with parents and families as they try to navigate through the technology. Just little things like it's like I give like very specific instructions about how to do stuff, like checking your email and having those videos. And then I'll have a parent email me a picture where there's just a little page that says welcome and they don't know to exit that. And they're like, we can't get on the email. So having those moments where I'm like, can't you just like click exit? But they don't know, and they don't know those moments. So I think the biggest, honestly, frustration for me has just been that I'm a little bit disconnected in that way. So I need to remember to like be patient and kind of take a step back and remember literally every step instead of skipping a couple that I just do naturally.
That's a really good point. Okay, another one that's kind of interesting. how has being online affected your teaching methods? So I guess kind of like, what are some things from your experience teaching online, would you teach any differently in terms of like your strategies in the classroom? I think that would be an interesting question to hear.
Yeah, I definitely do feel a little bit more limited right now in my virtual teaching, just in the sense that I haven't quite figured out like breakout rooms and stuff. I know it's an easier thing to do on Zoom. I haven't fully looked into it yet with Microsoft Teams, but group work is something that I don't have as much of, just because I don't have as much manipulatives. Like all the students, most of the students don't have the items at home. So they are using virtual things. So there's not as many games, I would say. I did a lot of game-based and like play-based learning, even in the older grades. So I'm not able to do as many of those yet, just because I'm not as comfortable yet. But I think those things will develop over time as I get, because right now I'm just kind of in this mode of I want to get everything out and make sure that there's something. Whereas when in a couple weeks where I can be a little bit more thoughtful with my activities, I think I will be able to incorporate more game-based play and group work. But I think that's the biggest thing right now for my previous teaching that I'm kind of lacking.
Awesome. Okay. Another question came in. I think this person remembered their question that they wanted to ask earlier because you mentioned teams. So you talked about students working in teams. How do they do that if they're not using breakout rooms?
So what you can do and what I have done, so at the beginning of the year, I did those one-on-one calls with students. And then I did group calls with students who went to the same school. So I have like 6 students from one school, 6 students from another school, and then I have like a mix of students. So I just scheduled smaller group teams meetings for them at various times and told them what time that they would be coming in. And then you can actually calendar invite certain students. So having them in smaller groups and kind of working. And then now that I've had my levels with the reading, I'll be able to do smaller reading groups and kind of have students who are on the same level. So it's just a matter of scheduling them at the same time to kind of work as a group like that.
Awesome. Okay, there's not any questions. I'm going to give you my what I ask everyone at the end, my question. If I was going into my first day of teaching tomorrow, what would you tell me? Can you hear me? I think we had a technical difficulty. Okay. Okay, we just got another question, so I'll save my question for after. Do you have to structure and organize everything a lot more meticulously for online teaching? It seems like the students work independently and everything has to be crystal clear.
Can you say that again? Sorry, you were cutting out.
Oh, sorry. Basically, do you have to structure and organize things more online?
I wouldn't say more. I would just say differently. So you do have to schedule your day, I guess, and have those activities pre-planned for them to see. But you do that normally in an actual classroom as well. Like, you have or most people, I guess, have their schedule out and then you just have it on your day plan. So you typically kind of already have that schedule. So it's just about making sure that it's fully prepared before you get to school and like the night before. So I guess in a different way it is, but I wouldn't say it's more than a typical one.
Awesome. Okay, now I'll give you my question. If I were going to my first day of teaching tomorrow online, what would you tell me?
I would tell you to be patient, really important, and to be open. So being open to suggestions from parents, being open to changes. Everything is going to be changing as you go with your online classroom. So having those moments to change those things, and then also having those moments to take a step back and step away from the computer and check in with yourself and make sure that you're doing okay and that your students are doing okay, to kind of create that kind of safe and fun environment. And remembering that when we're first setting up everything, that the curriculum will come, but the first focus is getting everyone there and happy and kind of healthy. So thinking about those.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much, Jessica, for being a speaker. That was so awesome. I learned so much. And then all of the attendees, there are many more sessions left, so make sure you go check out the event calendar. There's another session this week on Thursday that actually probably will be coming off of this because it's a more in-depth engagement strategy session. So if you want to learn more, check that one out. But thank you everyone for coming, and thank you so much, Jessica.
Thanks for having me, and thanks for coming, everyone.
Bye.